And I covered this not too long ago about the route that America was going, and that most America and America has been this way longer than I've been alive, but we're now seeing it much more openly, what they refer to as democratic socialism, which is just socialism. Gives it a nice name to it. Kind of makes you feel like you're a part of it. This is the route that the country is going. And so yesterday in New York, and it shouldn't surprise many people in New York that this is the route that they're going. And so you have, articles like this from Politico talking about what is democratic socialism. And so yesterday, this is from Kristen Gonzalez. She is a Latina. And this is typically why in a society you don't elect women. Women by nature are socialists. And so you can see after white men gave women the right to vote, the result was that women don't need no man. And moving forward, the reason why, it's not because these women can go out and work and create jobs, etc. It's that they will vote for your money. And then they say they don't need you. And so yesterday in New York, it says we ended last night with a 58% majority, winning by more than 26 percentage points. Neighborhoods across Brooklyn, Manhattan, and Queens resoundingly elected a 27-year-old socialist Latina to office. And this is her. This is a picture of her right here, right? And she opened. These people are open that they're socialists and they want to bring socialism to America. Where their ancestors came from, their ancestors fled socialism. And they come here. They come here to America and they see the abundance in the country. And of course, naturally, they're like, hey, why don't we spread socialism here? And it sounds fantastic when you contribute nothing. Like these politicians, like her, she doesn't contribute anything to the country, but she wants to distribute the wealth of those who contribute. And this is always the route that it goes. And this is why you don't give women the right to vote. And this is why you don't elect women into positions of office, because this is what they do. Another example is another Latina, right? AOC. What is it? Alexandria Cortez, whatever her name is. And when you actually look at her family came from wealth prior to her father passing away. And so when her father died, the family was obviously a bit more impoverished and they had to move from their very nice area where they were. And then she had to go out and get a job and she worked as a bartender. And so naturally, having come down a rung from where she was because of the loss of her father and because of the loss of the income and the family only having to live off of the income of her mother, she thought to herself, wouldn't it be fantastic if we could just steal other people's money and give it to me and give it to people like me? And so she became a politician, another person who contributed absolutely nothing to society, working as a college student with debt and working in a bar. And this is the route that it always goes. And of course, it will continue to go this way because you have a lot of weak men. And eventually, it all goes away. Just like all other socialist nations, right? Just pick your socialist nation, right? Which one of them is currently not in abstract poverty, right? You look at Venezuela, you look at Cuba, right? Look at Zimbabwe, etc. All these places eventually turn their countries into places of abstract poverty, and then they basically have to start all over again. That's why you see when I go to Colombia all the time. And so I meet a lot of women from Venezuela. Of course, they come from Venezuela to Colombia. And a lot of them, some of the most beautiful women that all these Americans would simp over are prostitutes in Colombia. And many of them have degrees. Many of them have degrees because they previously went to college and there's no work because socialism, right? Socialism destroyed their country. Eventually you run out of other people's money to vote for, and then your country collapses, and then c'est la vie. And this is the route that America will go, because what will happen is the people who produce are tired of seeing their money go to other people. You work and you work and you work all these long hours, and half of your money goes to some dipshit that doesn't want to work, and you say to yourself, self, like many of these Latinos, many of these other Latinos and Latina families that fled from Honduras, many of these other places, yes, they're communism now. They were socialist before. But when supply starts to run out, what happens is for the government to stay in power, the government says, self, how are we going to stay in power? Well, we need to seize the means of production. And so they go out and they seize the oil industries, and they start seizing all these different businesses so that they can remain in power, so that they can distribute, right, the remaining wealth to their allies who will fight for the system, right? And this is what will happen in America. And so a lot of people, just like those producers that wanted to find a better way of life, they will leave America, many of these places. That's why America and the West is saying we need to have a minimum tax, so that all these producers, and this is the whole point to that, so all these producers, they can't run away and flee to another country to pay less taxes. And that's what the minimum tax will do. But these individuals, like the socialists they don't understand business. And so a business will just pass on that tax to the consumer. And so the prices will rise, and the quality of life will start to go down as you are forced to pay more for the basic needs: food, electricity, housing, etc. And that will consume your life until you can't afford something. Can't afford housing, you can't afford electricity, you can't afford food. Just look at all these other socialist Hispanic nations that have gone that route. It always ends the same way. That's why they come here, right? That's why they sit there and they swim through the borders. That's why they swim over. They make little rafts for themselves, right? Like all those people coming from Cuba, they'll make like some makeshift raft so that they can swim over to Florida. That's why they come here, because they made their country shit. And so like many Republicans who live in all these red states, and they see all these people fleeing from blue states, and they say, you can come here, just don't bring your politics here. But often they do, because these dipshits come here and they see that they do the exact same thing. The same thing happened in Colombia. When all the Venezuelan people fled from Venezuela into Colombia, then they started saying, wouldn't it be nice if we could vote for some of the wealth to be given to us? And so you see a lot of the Venezuelans in Colombia complaining about there's no social programs here. And the people of Colombia elected a leftist president. Now, hopefully he won't be stupid enough to go that route, but you never know. But this is the route that we're starting to see a lot of nations. There will always be nations, because some nations would be like, that's not a good idea. We're not going to go that route. We're going to be a little bit more pro-capitalism. We're going to be more pro-entrepreneurship. We're going to be a little more pro-freedom. And so you have to make a decision of what do you want to do, right? If you're a young person, if you're an old person, maybe you're going to retire somewhere. And more than likely, you're a socialist anyway, because you still live off of the government with Social Security that you voted for, right? But for many young people who are looking for a way out, you're going to be like those Hispanics that you saw, that you made fun of swimming over the border, right? And you're going to be doing that, but you're going to be doing it leaving America. Because eventually the cost of living will become too high, and you'll end up doing the same thing and going into other countries. And when you choose to do that, the most important thing you have to have is a transferable skill. Ideally, a trade, so that no matter where you go, you can take that trade with you and start a business or have some sort of online business. But this is the route that America is going to go. You're going to see, and these people are sitting here and they're like cheering at you, these limp-wristed, right? You look at all the men in the crowd, they all look soft. They all look weak, right? This dude over here with a mask on. And of course, you see lots and lots of women, because it's fantastic, right? What do you mean we don't have to go to work? We can just vote for money? That's fantastic. I love that idea, right? I'm a woman. I'm oppressed. I need all these. I need money. I need money for all these things that I want to do. Like, do you want to contribute to society? No, I'm a woman. I don't need to contribute to society. And so what you see is a lot of the very simple things that God required of people. I mean, think about it. When you look at all the laws that many of these countries have, just take a look at America. There are thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of books just all related to the different types of laws. These you have laws, and then you have books, and you have laws for these laws, and then explanations, and judges sit here and have to think and ponder, what do they exactly mean by this? And yet, in the Bible, God gave his people just 10 commandments, right? Moses came down, I got these 10 things that you need to do. This is all that God requires of you. And of course, later on, the people had to be expounded upon because I guess the 10 was just too much for them. So, of course, they ended up with a bunch of more laws. But one of the laws, which was the very last law in the 10 Commandments talked about, and it said, "You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his manservant, or his maidservant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor." And so that is one of the biggest problems with many of these socialists, right? They covet, they see what you have, and they want it, and they want to take it. But the problem is that they're so weak. Like, look at these men, look at these men. You think any of these men around here are gonna we're gonna rally, we're gonna go over and we're gonna rob these people? Hell's no. They'll get their shit pushed in. That's what they're afraid of. But what they can do is they can unite, and they can, we're going to vote, right? We're gonna, Democratic, right? That's the whole point. That's the whole Democratic part, right? We're going to vote for your wealth. And I always think, I should have looked it up before doing this. And I believe it was Adams. I believe it was John Adams that had said, once the people realize that they can vote for other people's wealth, once the people realize that they can vote for money, he said, the republic is over, right? And we are living at the end of the republic. That's why you never hear the Democrats talk about our republic. What do they always refer to it as, right? Every time Nancy Pelosi gets on stage, what are they trying to take? They're not trying to take our republic. They're trying to take away our democracy. America is not a republic. It is a socialist, democratic unionization of states. And eventually, like all socialist nations, it will collapse. And I hope you're not there living in it to see it. Hopefully you'll be somewhere else in another nation. I had been planning to buy some land and start a business because I wanted to get into farming and agriculture and some herbiculture. I think that's what they refer to it as when you're like raising animals. I forget. Because I wanted to get into clothing and food production and freshwater fish and stuff like that. And I thought to myself, I don't think that's a good idea. At least not here. Not in the direction that the country is going. Because by the time, businesses take a little bit of time before they actually kick off. And so it's just, I don't see it as a good investment moving forward. Especially because a lot of that money is going to be put towards social programs. So I've decided instead of doing it here, I'm probably going to do it in another country. And that's what I would advise for many of you, especially if you're a young person. You're going to see more of this moving forward. And a lot of this keeps young people down. It keeps entrepreneurship down, and it puts reliance on the state. And people like this, right? Dudes like this, they want to rely on the state. They want someone to take care of themselves because they can't do it themselves. They're weak. Eventually, all this goes away. LO always loved history. And that's why they say that those who don't learn from history, they end up repeating it, right? People who don't pay attention to what happened in the past end up making the same mistakes in their future. And of course, many of these people don't want to listen to God. And of course, they foolishly go the route of socialism. The only thing you can do with the little remaining time that you have is to prepare. The people in Venezuela saw their collapse from a once mighty nation, right? The fifth largest economy in the world, right? At one point, Venezuela was the fifth wealthiest nation. Of all the Hispanic nations, it was the wealthiest nation of all the Hispanic nations. And is now probably one of the poorest nations, where the people are fleeing by the millions, pouring into countries like Colombia and then the surrounding nations. Of course, some of those Venezuelans are coming here. Overwhelmingly, most of them are men or families, and they're coming here for better opportunity, not realizing that they're walking into the same trap. And of course, it's beneficial for America because America needs the people. Why? Because they need people to pay the taxes, to pay for the social programs. That's why you see the borders are wide open, right? Because Americans aren't having kids. In this scenario, in scenarios like this, Why would you have children? You don't need children. I can rely on the state. Because previously, right, families would rely upon their children. As they got older, right, they've raised their children, they've paid for their colleges, they paid for, all of their education, they've given them housing for, 20 or maybe even 30 years. And then as they get older, then they rely upon their families to take care of them in their old age, and then they die, right? And the cycle continues. But in this scenario, where people realize, I don't need children, it's overwhelmingly women, where they realize I don't need offspring because the state will take care of me. The state eventually, because the people aren't having kids, the state needs to import, right? Either you got to force the people to have kids, or you have to import, you have to immigrate people. That's what America is doing, and that's all Western countries do, right? Or those Western countries that are not doing this will just collapse. It didn't work out for Europe because they were pulling from all those Middle Eastern countries that don't share the same sort of freedoms that, the West does, of education and the women's role, etc. They started pulling it from Middle East, and Middle East are mostly Muslims, right? And so the Muslims, don't have all that sort of appreciation for education, for women, etc., and the freedoms and etc., right? But America pulls from Hispanic nations. Why? Because many of those Hispanic nations are still patriarchal. They're still having children, right? There's still a father and a mother, etc. But in America, it's not like that. Birth rate has been down, plummeting for the past 50 years. And so the only thing America can do is they can pull in Hispanics because they need people to pay the taxes to pay for the social programs. And that's why the border is open. That's why many of these Hispanics are fleeing to America, right? Because the opportunity is there to gain some sort of wealth, better than the socialist country that they're coming from, turning the socialist nation that they're moving to more socialist. And eventually it all collapses and those people will run to another country, right? It is what it is anyway. But this is a state, and you need to be prepared. You need to understand what is happening in America, because this is the route that's going to go. The young people that don't want to work are going to continue to vote for other people's money. And eventually, when other people's money runs out, you end up with an economic collapse. And that will happen to America. Because all these other nations will get tired of holding up America. America is only able to have the type of quality of life that they can because all of these other impoverished nations are basically supporting America. America lives off of the backs of many of the second and third world countries. So where all their food and stuff come from. What does America produce? It produces nothing but debt. Anyway, I'm going to leave it here. Leave your comment below. Thanks for watching, and I'll check you next time.